everyone. I'm back with our third episode of the Beloved by Clients podcast, now renamed to the Client Horror Stories. And speaking of client horror stories, the one and only awesome Jason Pittock is here. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Perfectly.
Is here, and he was about to tell me a client horror story. So I said, no. Let me press the record button on Zoom so the world can hear it. Let's dive right in. Tell us the story, Jason.
Thanks, Morgan. Thanks for inviting me to the show. So, I started out pretty young, working just because of my family. My dad and mum pretty much came from nothing and always working in entrepreneurship. And I wasn't always an entrepreneur. I was an employee for many, many years, but always quite subtly ambitious. I do have a very horror-filled story to share with you. And
I'm excited.
Basically, in the darkest depths of Buenos Aires, Argentina. So around 2014, 2015, I was working in a corporate interior construction company. So basically what we did was interior furniture. We did a lot of the design work and like the project management of the buildings, but majority we were manufacturing furniture to the project spec and basically delivering it, installing it, and the rest of it. I was obviously in sales and marketing and actually was responsible for juggling both teams. And it was a great job. I really enjoyed it. I absolutely love working with architects, love working with design, did a lot with, planning organizations. And I really liked that, and I was quite ambitious with sales. And the problem when you're doing construction, interior construction, is not really about sales. Unfortunately, there's a whole another side to it, which is delivery. So you can outsell and under deliver because you just don't have the capacity. You don't have the contractors. You don't have and this particular project, basically we had this customer who was a real estate developer, very, very famous because they do some of the biggest buildings in Palermo, which is a very nice neighborhood, very chic neighborhood in Buenos Aires, probably one of the most expensive real estates in Argentina, in the top couple anyway. And they just build buildings. They build buildings for offices, and they also build buildings for Airbnb. And these Airbnb buildings... They
build buildings just for Airbnb guests.
Investors, that's correct. So Airbnb investors in Buenos Aires is probably one of the big... I think it's the fastest growing Airbnb hub, or it was until COVID.
Pre-COVID, right?
Pre-COVID, right. Because, it's a pretty stable 15% return a year in dollars. It's pretty good for people to invest. And we never really got involved with what we would call residential interior furniture. We were always focused on commercial. And in this 2015, we had a very ambitious goal, revenue-wise. I'd put this goal, worked with the team, done the business development and the rest of it. And I knew this lead was there. I knew this customer was there. And they had to do a couple of buildings. I didn't know how many. So I was talking with the sales team, like, hey, let's get a meeting with them. Let's start looking at the spec, see if we can quote it. So we got a meeting with them, and I just straight away hit it off very well with the owner, actually the president of the company, like the owner, like it's a family business. It's him, his brother-in-law, and another guy, and they have a business. They're about 300 employees. So it's a pretty big business. But I had a...
Pause. I have a question I want to ask you. I don't know where this story is going, but I'm excited. But I'm wondering if at this early stage, when you first met them, there were anything that happened that in retrospect were yellow flags or warning signs but you didn't realize at the time.
Right. So I was quite young, right? I was in 21, 22. And I was, as I said, very ambitious. So I was very quick to make friends. And I made very good friends with them. Like I went out for dinner with them, went out for drinks, which was a yellow flag, as you would say. Quite quickly, they had my personal mobile, even my Instagram, my link. It immediately had pretty much multiple touch points of my life.
So let's discuss that for a second. Mm-hmm. What's the yellow flag there? Because often when you're prospecting, you become friendly with them to build a relationship with them.
Well, one thing I've learned, especially recently, is there is a difference between friendship and companionship. I think friendship is intimate, and professional companionship is professional companionship. So you're a companion in a deal, like you're a companion. So you're side by side, both got aligned goals, and you would do anything for that person in the deal. But you're still not their friends. You know, I have a very clear line now in my life, like who I consider a friend and who I consider a business associate. You know, when I moved, so I actually moved to Buenos Aires once this deal was starting to become signed off. I was actually living down south and flying into Buenos Aires every Monday and going out every Friday. So I even moved to Buenos Aires when we started looking at the magnitude of this deal. This wasn't 3 buildings, this was 7. 7 buildings of around 15, between 12 and 15 floors each. So that's the size of the deal. And we were supposed to do furniture for these buildings. So if you work it out, you're looking at around 90 floors of furniture multiplied by about 8 flats on a floor. So it's a very, very large project. And when we saw the figures, we did the quote, we saw the margin, we were looking at making a pretty nice margin. We were like, wow, this is just like the deal of the year. You know, this was just like, the team was, you know, ecstasy about it. We were just like, wow, like the commissions are going to be great. Everything's going to be good. We're just going to own this deal. Anyway, we got to the closing the deal, and we'd pretty much reviewed everything. We'd spoken to our contractors. We pretty much thought we were quite, I'd say we were uneasy about the delivery, because we knew it was going to be tough, because the timeline, these guys don't have any leeway. You know, you have to deliver on a certain date. If not, they're going to screw you over with the contract and interest and everything. Anyway, they sent through the contract for us to look at before negotiating, you know, T's and C's, but pretty much. We reviewed the contract. It looked pretty standard. And we then literally signed and landed this deal. I'm talking back in those days, it was like multi-million dollars for us. It was huge, you know, like we're a smallish company. You know, this was a big deal for us. It's like the deal of the year. So very ambitious. Yeah. So we start to tool, you know, we once we land a customer like that, land a project, we have like a lot of handover meetings to the project management team. When we sat down with our project manager and showed them the deal and the project, she took a deep breath and said, "I'm pregnant."
Ooh.
I can't handle this deal, this job. This is our lead project manager, like the ace of the team.
The best one, right?
Say you're talking like Shoemaker. You're looking at the fastest car on the track. You know, like you don't do in construction. Everything, as I said, is sales, but everything else is project management. Like project managers are the key players in your team. They're the people that make the money come in, because if you don't deliver, you don't get paid. I mean, it's a great deal, but you got to deliver it, because you get paid like a down payment, and then everything else is on delivery. So if you can't deliver, cash flow goes dry. You're in problems. So
and project management in construction is much more complex than in internet agency land,
or even software.
Physical things need to be dropped off and at huge scales. Yeah.
You can have a warehouse that can just be broken into. You know, pieces can get stuck in the port. You know, so many things can go wrong. So many moving parts. So she backed down. So that straight away, that was like the Titanic had just hit a bit of a, you know, some little iceberg down there, and I sat down.
So the question is one learning from that to make sure that for key roles you have multiple people, or it's risky to be dependent on one person? Yeah,
I think it's very, very, it came to light very quickly that what we'd done extraordinarily wrong was when we're sitting down with this customer and looking at the project, we didn't involve her.
Right.
Because the sales team and the marketing team had such a good idea, had such a good grasp of what to do because they knew we knew our stuff. We knew about the costs. We knew that we wanted to make the profit, because our commissions were generally based on profit. Right. So we knew that what project management we needed to do and what we didn't need to do. But what we were really worried about was the moment she backed down, we're like, we've lost our Messi or our Mbappe. You know, this is the most.
I like the Messi reference, but by the way, I want to emphasize that's another good learning, to basically involve the project managers earlier rather than later.
I'd say it's just as many people. And if you're doing a big deal, it doesn't really matter what industry you're in. You know, I don't think there is any negative side to involving a lot of people. At least put them in the know. Just sit down and bounce it off them. It takes 15 minutes. So we didn't bounce it off her really. She knew something about it, but she didn't have any idea of the magnitude. Again, we're looking at 7 buildings, anything in between 10 and 15 stories, and 8 flats, 8 Airbnbs per story. So so we had these 400 or 500 flats to fit out. Okay, and all furniture, all melamine, MDF board, and all of
I'm
the
getting so scared
cabinets.
for what happens.
So basically, we had to go out and hire another senior project manager, or somebody who was going to run the job.
Right.
That went extremely bad. We're already now 2 weeks into the schedule. Nothing had been moved forward on the project management. All we had done is secured materials, and then we finally stumbled across a couple. So a couple, there were literally a couple that worked together that were specialized in this type of project management. So we went along and hired them. They had quite a good understanding of furniture and what the industry we were in. So we felt straight away a bit more reassured. The customer did as well. Things started to clock into place. We're like, we're only 2 weeks. We're only 2 weeks out. Like, we're going to be okay. The delivery of the first building, for example, was like at the beginning of a month, like 3 months down the line from where we were at that moment. So we had time. So everything started to plan out. Everything went pretty smoothly then until we came to deliver the first building. We obviously don't manufacture ourselves. We subcontract all the manufacturing to manufacturers. Anyway, we came to deliver the first building. Lorries turn up, people are there, offload all the equipment, offload all the furniture, and they get to the first building, and the lift was broken. So we're already in a very difficult space because we're already 2 weeks out. And now, for example, the lift had broken, which is a very normal thing in these types of projects. Like, it can happen. They send a technician next day, it works. But it was like, I hate to say this, but it was like this karma was just telling us, like, cancel the project now, give them the money back. Just, this is going to go. I already start to feel very uneasy. Like, so just too much bad luck, it's just like bad luck was just following me around. I was like, and I was so young as well. I was like, as I said, I was like 22, 23. And these customers, these are like experienced real estate investors, very experienced in project management, very experienced in construction. We were really tooled up to do projects probably about 1/10 of this size, or one third of the size. And with our main player missing, it was just, we built a good relationship with these project managers, but basically that was the first of multiple different issues in that first building. Issues like plans were built wrong, were drawn wrong, interpreted wrong in the factory, measurements didn't meet, the furniture's specifications, and pretty much ended up being 4 weeks delivered late. The first building.
So basically, it turns out the couple wasn't that good because these are the sorts of responsibilities.
No. There was. I mean, I don't like to. This is not really their fault because we threw them in the deep end. Like, it was just expected. Right. You can't imagine hiring 2 people in a couple of weeks, throwing them into the fire, and thinking that they're going to deliver. It's just not going to work. Anyway, we delivered that first building, and then we had a call from the customer saying, "We want to meet you guys. We're worried." Like, we're very, very worried. So we had a meeting with them, and I remember turning up at that meeting. I knew who was going to be there because they had put a group chat, and in that group chat was actually one of the owners of the company, literally the guy who would pretty much be signature on every single check. Like, he was one of the founders. We met in a small coffee shop in Palermo. These guys even built that coffee shop. This is how strong they are. Like, they go in there and there's no one there because they built the place. They actually rent the place to the guy that works there. So I got in there. I was the only person going to meet the customer. They said, "We just want to see you. We don't want to see anyone else." And I went in there. It's
interesting that they only wanted to see you.
Yeah, because they knew I was actually, by that time, I was in senior position in the company. They knew pretty much the buck stopped with me, and then there was the business owners, and that was pretty much it. They sat down and they said, "Look, we closed the deal with you. We want to sort this out with you. We don't want to sort this out with the project manager, even your interim project managers or your sales team, your delivery team. We just want to talk to you. We're very worried. And unfortunately, we're going to have to create a second contract with terms and conditions that you're going to be liable for any of the losses and the delays." I remember just like anxiety. I just knew where this was going. Like, we work in construction and delivery is delivery is always problematic. Like it's just a fact, but it wasn't this level of this level of difficulty was just, when you play a game, you put like level of difficulty and you sort of toggle it up and down. This was like right on the red, So I went out of that meeting and I had wet hands. I was, sweat marks around here. Like I was shaking. I was in a position of extreme pressure. I was very young, had very little emotional support or resources at that time. So I called up my dad, and my dad's pretty much has run his own businesses since his 20s as well, early 20s. And I said, look, this is what's going on. Can you give me a hand? Like, can you just tell me what I should do? He just said, you need to sit down and just tell them, look at the absolute worst case scenario and tell the customer. Set the expectation as really, 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 really bad. And then when you can work up from that, it's going to be a lot easier than working down, which is actually a very, very good, wise words. It's better to say the worst and then over deliver than under deliver. Anyway, so I went and sat down with the team and said, look, guys, we've got this contract. They sent the contract through by email, literally like 15 minutes after the meeting, like, here it is, please sign it. If not, you're not going to be going into the next building. This is when another problem started happening. Cash flow started kicking in because we'd now been delayed a whole month more than the schedule. We'd already scheduled to be already in the second or the third building, not the first. We still had 6 more to do. So we managed to sort of articulate pulling more teams together and, people and it was just absolutely mayhem. Like we suddenly had this schedule. They were like, you have to meet the schedule. We wrongly didn't do what my father said, which was go and say, look, guys, we're not going to meet this. We, as they say in Spanish, we mariconear. Mariconear, by the way, for guys in English means when you're a bit of a scaredy cat, you don't want to say the worst. We did that. We played the scaredy hat and we said, okay, we'll sign the contract, which was an absolute mistake because we then had one of the toughest lawyers prosecuting us. And that's a clickbait for what's about to come. So
the clickbait for the end of the story.
For the end of the story. So we.
By the way, another lesson could be your parents are wiser than you think, and like no matter how old or young you are, they may have good insight.
100%. And
do you know? By the way, do you know the famous Mark Twain line about that? Yes. He said, "Yeah, I'll tell the listeners anyway in case they don't know. When I was 18." I couldn't believe how little my parents knew. When I was 21, I couldn't believe how much they had learned in 3 years.
So those 3 years were very,
exactly.
Very long years, weren't they? So
exactly.
extra long. Yeah. So we didn't really adhere to the advice that we'd been given. So we sat down with the team and said, guys, we just got to pull this off. Come on, we're young, we're energetic. We ramped everyone up. We're a team of about 6. Who are running the project in between sales, project management, and delivery. And then there was all of the contractors and project managers were in the buildings.
And another pause. I have a question about that meeting. Do you think them doing that, do you think their worries and fears based on what had happened up to that point were justified and the contract was fair? Or do you think they were a classic asshole technique is when someone makes a little problem, you jump on it to take advantage of it?
I'll get to that now. At the moment, I think they're being totally fair. They did turn into ugly frogs. That was around in about 3 paragraphs from now. But the reality, the reality is that they were being fair. They had invested money. They'd paid us a down payment. We should already been in the second or third building, and we'd barely finished the first. They became very A-ish when we came to in 2 or 3 buildings down the schedule. That's when things really started to go bad. So we
let's
sat
go
down
to the next paragraph. Let's go.
Yeah, we sat down with the team, cracked open a few beers and said, guys, look, we need to figure out how we fix this. We can't not pause off. This is the deal of the year. We can make good money. Let's not, because bear in mind, time equals money, and especially in Argentina when you're in a devaluing currency, this deal was done and fixed in our local currency. So every time that you were cashing your next checks, it was already devalued maybe 4 or 5%. Right. So you had that all worked into your costing you your project. But anyway, the point was we sat down and said, guys, we'll fix this. And somebody came out with something very interesting. They said, instead of us going building by building, let's get more contractors and deliver 2 buildings at once. And 2 buildings. Then, in a month and a half from now, we'll already actually be, because project management for 1 building is, we could sort of project manage 2 as well. So we said, okay, but the only bottleneck we have then is production, manufacturing. So we went and literally jumped in our cars the next day, went and spoke to the manufacturer, said, look, we need to do 2 buildings at once. I said, we don't know if we can do that, but we'll have a meeting, we'll figure it out, and we'll let you know. It came back to us literally a day or so later. Said, okay, we'll do what we can. We'll try and deliver 2 buildings at once. So, floor 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 2 buildings. So we're sort of back on schedule. We've signed the contract, agreed to these terms and conditions, which were literally like this. If building number 2 wasn't delivered by the 31st, there was a 1% value of that building deducted day on day in, as in day out. So every single day, there's like 1% deducted off your.
Oh no.
Yeah. So.
Oh no.
So building number 2 and building number 3, we sent into production, measured up, sent it to production. They came out of the production pretty well on time. These guys did a really great job. And when they turned up to site, more problems started to happen. The first problem that happened, which was absolutely completely and 150% out of our hands, is all of the furniture was stored over the weekend in a basement, like a underfloor ground, really nice parking. It flooded. It flooded about 15, 20 centimeters.
Oh, no.
And thankfully, furniture is wrapped in plastic, right? This like really tough plastic. But the problem is that all of the bottom packs are always the biggest pieces. And it wasn't like we could just say, okay, floors 3, 4, and 5 got waterlogged, we'll make them again. No, they were pieces that we needed for every single floor. Okay, so they're like, for example, a piece like let's just say a frame that goes behind a cabinet is 2 meters high by 1 meter wide. Right. They're the ones always at the bottom of the pallet.
Right.
So the water came up and soaked important pieces for all of the floors for both buildings. Sorry, for one of the buildings. It wasn't both. So we said, okay, again, realign. This is our stress level was just well out. The client realized, because he lost, they lost thousands and millions of, not millions, but I think thousands of dollars in cement and things that literally got waterlogged. So we said, look, this is not our responsibility. There should have been a drain, So we actually really didn't offset us financially, because they actually recognized the stuff that was flooded. That wasn't our issue. But it again delayed us, and those dates weren't going to change. So we rushed to deliver building number 3 while we were remaking.
So because the delay, it did impact it. It could still trigger the 1% deli fee.
Oh, 100%.
By the way, I also want to add, your story is awesome. I'm kind of scared for it's going, but I want to add the parenthetical for the listeners that sometimes people think that, the boss, the client, they're making so much money and I'm not. But what often a lot of people don't realize is that contracts commonly include provisions like this, that you can very quickly lose all the money. So there's a massive risk on that side as well.
I think so. And that's why there is so few successful entrepreneurs in the world. There's a huge, there's a high, in any business, there's always a huge upside and risk. And that's, people learn to live and sleep with risk, and some people don't. And it's absolutely fine to have a 9 to 5, but when you're an entrepreneur, there are risks. And so when we came to deliver the building number 2, which is the one that got flooded, and the building number 3 was pretty much finished, because we couldn't deliver number 2 because everything was waterlogged. Let's do number 3. So we sent all of our teams to number 3. They did it super quick, delivered that on time. That was great. Now we had to fix number 2. So we juggled, the production, the bits that we had to remake and put it up. By that time, this second stage of the delivery was out by 3 weeks. So we're now 1 month and 3 weeks delayed the whole chronogram of the 7 buildings. So as you can imagine, we came to send the plans to do building number 4 and 5. And we had a little message saying we want to meet Jason again. By the way, by now we've already lost about 8 or 10% of the down payment, as in of the 50% or 30% were, which is a very high percentage. So I'm talking probably $10,000, $8,000 or more. I don't know. I can't remember the net figures now, but it was a lot of money for us then. Still is today. Anybody? So I knew we were single figure weeks away from having to deliver all 7 buildings. So we should have finishing this project in the next 6 to 7 weeks. We still had buildings 4, 5, 6, and 7 to deliver. So 4 buildings. And I was triaging emails from them, messages. And this is when things got really ugly. This email came through saying, "I want to meet Jason." And I replied back, "I'm not going to see you guys on my own because I need to, this is a team. We need a team. Like, this is not just me. Like, I can't handle this, like, just on my shoulders. It's just not, I need you to understand that I need to depend on the team." And that's when things got really rough. They hired a lawyer, a prosecutor.
So they hired a lawyer at that point, like before even the second meeting?
Yeah, they hired a lawyer. I mean, we'd had like project meetings, but not like, I would say, where I met the owner and they're literally talking about, damaging
the
us
high
financially. Yeah. Like I'm talking, we had like project meetings would have happened every week. I wasn't in those meetings, but the team would have been. So the guy says to me, "Look, I want to meet you. This is just really messed up." And this is when they started. All the friendship disappeared, of course, and it went very personal, very, very personal. So, for example, I remember we had finished building number 3. So already building number 3 and fast tracking a little bit forward. 3 and 4, we're delivering 3 and 4. We were off schedule. Things were going wrong, just left, right, and center. For example, I would go away for a weekend and they were stalking me because I'd get an email saying, "Hey, it was very fine seeing you at the beach, but like we're delayed." Yeah.
That's messed up. That's messed up.
Yeah. I was like, how do they know? Like maybe because I put something on my Instagram or on my WhatsApp state. I don't know. Like it started to jar with me a little bit, like, hey, I actually still have a life. Like, I mean, things can go wrong, but when, this isn't prison, like you can't,
wow.
We are, it's not like we're not delivering, we're behind, we're delayed.
That's powerful. Do you have another example of how they stalked you?
Yeah, I do. This one's a little bit, this is quite worrying, this one. So this is supposedly a multi-million company. And when they paid us with checks. If you're in Argentina, anyone listening to the show in Argentina, you understand what I mean. If you're not, I'll explain very briefly what they are. In Argentina, there's a law that allows you to put your name, a figure, an amount, and a date, and that date is when you can cash the check. So it's like a deferred date for cashing the check. Okay?
You can't cash it before the date written on it.
But what you can do is send it to a supplier or to somebody. Now, the business was looking at buying a vehicle, and they used one of the checks from this payment months before, had passed it on to a car dealership, like a Volkswagen or Toyota or whatever. Yeah. And then I knew they bought this vehicle, and I got a message from one of the guys saying, "Hey, it's a nice vehicle you guys have just bought. Is that with our money?" And because when a check cashes, it cashes, and you can see who's cashed it, like what company has pulled the funds, right? And of course, just say, for example, Volkswagen.
So these are like Volkswagen or whoever
had deposited the check,
right?
And they'd obviously seen the check number. Oh, that's the one we gave to, the company Jason's working with, or Jason's company, or whatever. And they were like, "You should be prioritizing us, not buying vehicles." That was the comment. So it got real creepy, not creepy, just got very uneasy. And, the worst thing about it is that these guys at the same time, they had they were affluent, these guys moving around in very affluent circles, very, very prominent. And they were becoming very personal. Like they were talking very rudely, very uncomfortable. Anyway, it got to the worst situation. We had to deliver the last 2 buildings. So did building number 6 and 7, and they were the biggest buildings. So we had to do it in stages, like chunks. So we planned it all out. We're already probably like 3 months behind schedule. Like this job should have been delivered in, say, 6 months. We were already in month number 9, something 8. It was bad. Like it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. It was like we weren't supposed to do this, and Mother Nature was saying, "Guys, go home."
Perfect storm.
Just we flew into an absolute chaos. The business became a chaos because the worst thing that happened was the business lost focus. Sales team got down. You know, they were sad. They were messed up because of the way we were being treated and how bad this deal was going. Finance got messed up because everything affects finance. Finance is the lifeblood of a company. You know, if there's sales, there's finance. Being construction, if there's no delivery, there's no finance, there's no cash. But we still had to pay materials. We still had to secure prices to maintain our profit margins on the project. So everything started to go wrong. Everything started to unravel, and it was extreme pressure, and it was like a very critical moment for me personally. And it was the first time I turned to a therapist in my life. You know, I'd been to like a personal therapist, like a personal, psychologist, but I'd never been to like a professional therapist for, business-related stress or financial stress. I hadn't been paid for about 4 months. I hadn't been paid my wage. I was pretty much it.
You weren't paid because the company was putting every cent towards trying to make this happen.
Just to finish this job. It was tough. I said, look, don't pay me. I mean, I can live for a year without being paid, or 6 months. Just don't pay me. Pay me when the job's delivered. I knew there was a big balloon of cash at the end, so I wasn't too worried at that point. I didn't know that balloon was going to pop either. I just expected it was.
More clickbait for the end of the story.
Of course. We're marketers, right? So we, I remember literally calling my old psychologist I'd had, when I was in my late teens, just about life, saying, look, I'm in a really bad way. I can't sleep. I was having anxiety attacks. I don't know if you know anxiety attacks are, Morgan, but if anyone listening, I'd get in the back of a taxi or a cab, Uber, to go from one side of the city to the next, and I'd do 3 blocks and say, hey, stop, I got to get out. I just couldn't take it. Like, just closed, somebody closing a door would just trigger it in my mind, and I'd just go, all of my neural. And I was thinking that I was going to die. I was going to run out of oxygen, just collapse. I was going to, burn out, just fatigue out. And just that was the end of me. Jason, 23-year-old, Buenos Aires, just blip out. Thankfully, I came across this therapist. They gave me the number of this guy. He said he's one of the best, and I actually still have a lot to do with him now. He is the best in Buenos Aires. He specializes in political and in business-related leadership issues and things like that. He might be able to help you out. And I went and spoke to him, and I told him the whole story, pretty much what I've told you guys up to now, because that's more or less where I was at that stage. And he just said, you know what? He said, this is going to be the best thing that's ever happened to you. I was like, what? It's like, I feel I'm going to die. He said, this will set you up for the rest of your life. You just need to figure out how to overcome everything so you get out the other end of life. He said, but this will be the training, and will give you the endurance and the training you'll need for everything else you're going to touch in the rest of your life. It's like, all right, his name's Carlos. I was like, Carlos? Like, sorry, he speaks perfect English and Spanish as well, but we were talking English. I said, like, how? Like, I mean, there is nothing good that's come out of this. He says, he said, the difference between business and life, he says, have 2 things in common. You have to learn to deal with difficult people. And he said, this will teach you perseverance. This will teach you a lot of different things that you would never, ever have learned just everything going fine, with all your sails in the right direction and, sailing along. You're in turbulent times, like this is like life or death financially for you, and it was for me. I was literally, wow. I was living out of my savings.
By the way, I want to add this great insight and way of framing it, and it's the same insight behind Beloved by Clients and this whole series. It's all about helping you listeners dealing with really, really difficult people. So I love it. I love his framing of it.
All I can say is I didn't know that was, but all I can say is that if you guys out there are dealing with let me use the word shitty people or just really horrible people and horrible times, they do exist. And not always people will appear difficult people, but they can become very, very difficult because things happen. And again, as you said, things can trigger in people's minds and heads, and people can change, and things can turn very ugly. The difference is if you can somehow just take one thing away from it, at least not everything is lost, and I mean, I look back on it today, and that time, I remember it was 4:00 on a Thursday afternoon in this guy's office in Buenos Aires, and just said, this is the best thing that's ever happened to you. Because he asked me about my life, he asked me about my upbringing, I told him a little bit about migrating to Argentina. But overall, I'd never had a life other than, I guess, when I was around my teens. I'd never really had a life where I could say this was real hardship. Pretty much, college, I mean, studying went okay. Secondary school was quite fun. I had some issues because I was a little bit overweight and I used to get bullied, but that was about the worst thing, that happened to me. Being beat up a few times or just being bullied. That was like the worst thing that ever happened, in my life. Some other things that happened, I lost a friend in an accident. There were difficult times, but this was real pressure because something can happen to you once, but this was happening day in, day out, day in, Monday to Saturday, not Monday to Friday. No. These guys on Saturday were calling you up. They were insistent. They were persistent. The
construction industry is also very tied in with the mafia in Buenos Aires and everywhere. 100%. And things were really bad,
really aggressive,
hurt as well.
Yeah. You got to hurt psychologically. It's not nice. Anything can happen in construction. I always say anything can happen. That's principally also why I got out of it. But anyway, so we're delivering the last 2 buildings. They are so big, huge. Talking of I can actually even still remember one of them square meters. We're looking at about 50,000 square meters of real estate. So pretty big buildings, not skyscrapers, but 15, 16-story buildings with 12 flats per floor. So sort of 200 flat buildings, 300 flat buildings. Anyway, so this job, pretty much we were already cash flow dry. It was very, 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 very tight to deliver. The timing was just, we were scraping in, just making the dates. That they were now micromanaging everything. They were micromanaging each floor delivery, each flat delivery. They had a checklist they would be going through every single day. They'd be sending it to us by email. Our team was, it was very, very aggressive, the back and forth. This is when I met the lawyer face to face. Okay. I turn up at the building. My job was to go once a week to review progress I turned up there. I remember I was in a jacket, sport, I had a shirt on, you've got I think it was a blue or white t-shirt, blue or white shirt. And then I had this jacket over the top, and then I had jeans, and then my dark jeans and some shoes, right? And my bag. And I turned up at the building. I knew already late. We've been months late. We were 4 months out. But there was always issues. For example, there'd be issues with the construction company. For example, we needed to move into another floor, but the floors weren't finished, or the plasterers hadn't finished, or the guys was doing lighting and we were putting in the furniture and they hit the furniture and that door fell off, and then we had to replace that door. And problems, mainstream, and so many of them. They were incalculable how many fires that you had to be putting out, or the project delivery team were putting out every single day. Bearing in mind, we're talking about working with 2 people we'd never worked with before. And our main project manager and her team weren't available. She was out. So obviously we had to move them onto other projects. So I turned up at this meeting. It was on the site. I didn't know they were going to be there, these guys. I've already said it, but I turned up there and just walked into the building and knew I was going to see some of my team there. And they're I heard my name called out, Jason. So I turned around. And there's the owner of the construction company, the architect that designed the freaking buildings. He's renowned in Buenos Aires. He's very well known. You can Google his name. He's in newspapers. He's a very well known architect. Then there was the guy that is the investor of the buildings. There's one guy who's the investor. Then there was the head of the construction company who literally manages the project. An absolute legend, to be honest. He was the only guy I could say through and through didn't change his tune. He didn't change his character. He was always tough, but he was fair. He actually was the guy who I'd say if there was any respite, I found it in him. And then there was this lawyer. And, when I'd watch Suits, and I thought lawyers were like these sort of, good looking, smart, polished shoes, sporty type, ambitious. No. This was a 65-year-old, slick hair back, brill cream back, no aftershave, shirt untucked, very, very wide jeans, brown shoes, and jacket over the top with you could visible food stains. And I was like, I'd seen this guy in emails, and I Google his name. I knew this guy was just an absolute beast, if he's running because you've got to understand, these guys now had a problem with their customers because they had to deliver them to investors, and they're like 4 months out and 5 months out and 6 months out. And the investors want their flat because they want to run it out and get their return on investment, And so he's protecting them at the same time prosecuting us. So I was expecting the worst of the worst. I was expecting to be just torn down. And so I turned around when they called my name, and I just thought, this is it. These guys are just going to lay into me. They're just going to cut me up. They're just going to destroy me. I was already defeated. I had sleepless nights. I just knew this was just the worst thing that had ever happened to me in my business life. My career, I just think this is just it. After this, I just want to go and be I just want to just surf and just, that's it. I'll go and work and do some juices in a bar and I'll be happy. This is it. I can't obviously I'm not cut out for business. I can never make it. Anyway, and I walked over and he says, this is your Jason. This is the lawyer. I was like, yeah, I'm Jason. He says, you come with me a second. So literally grabbed him by my hat, he took me up the stairs to go into the shop. I was like, they're not coming? He's like, no. He says, I just want to talk to you. He says, you don't mind if I smoke? So, okay, we're inside. I mean, if you smoke, I generally go outside, but it's a building site, people smoke inside. But so you sort of got out the Chesterfield cigarettes. So if anyone's listening to this, Chesterfield cigarettes are like the cheapest of the cheapest cigarettes you can buy. Okay, they're literally like venom. Got out a cigarette. Said, do you want one? I was like, no, I'm okay. Lit a cigarette, and it was raining. It was a bit windy, and he couldn't light it. And he says, and he was like, and I said, I sort of helped him shield, so he could light his cigarette, and he lit a cigarette. He just looked up at me, and I never forget what he said. He said, do you realize the mess that you're in? And I said, I think I do. And I was literally nearly breaking down. This guy hadn't even asked me who I was. He knew who I was. He's one of the most toughest lawyers there is in Buenos Aires. I knew this guy, I'd already Googled him. I'd seen him in the contracts, in the emails. He says, this whole building, he said, has got 300 families that should be living in this 4 months ago. 300 families should be here, rented or whatever, but 300 people need their flats. They said the construction company has a problem, and that problem is with you as well. He says, but I'm going to tell you something. He says, I'm not going to be after you. He said, I'm going to defend the company, and that means defending you. I was like, wow. This guy is just such a good guy. He's understanding me at last. The construction company was always pointing fingers and stabbing in the back about everything, and this guy suddenly realized, hey, wait, this isn't just them. There's actually other problems and moving parts on this that mean a lot, that are contributing to this bottleneck. Unfortunately, this guy didn't. I don't know if this is common in lawyers, but if anyone lawyer is listening to this, sorry, but he flipped. A month, 2 weeks later, he was a different guy. But I just got so. This is when things were turning really ugly, and he suddenly appeared to be very supportive and and truthful and understanding, I should say. Anyway, so we walked around the building and I was like, yeah, what's you got finished? Where's the material? When's it turning up? Have you got another? Can you get another team? He says, look, from now on, I want you to come every single day, and every time you come, I want you to call me. Here's my number. It's like, okay. If that's gonna keep them off me, I'll do it. If these guys aren't going to call me on Saturday morning at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. when I'm just waking up, then I'll do it. So I did. I went to that building site every single day till the day it was delivered. And the interesting thing is the guy did turn nasty. The lawyer did turn nasty. He did turn, I'd say he turned bad. Yeah, he did bad things after he was aggressive to me. But I went to that building site till it was completely and utterly finished. And I even physically worked and helped offload things and oversee things, and completely left my job, my career on the sideline for 2 months, a month and a half. It was about 7 or 8. No, yeah, it was about 6 weeks. It was about 2 months till the project was finished. And we delivered it. By that time, pretty much most of the balloon payment at the end was debilitated because of the interests or we were well over the delivery. And the guy, they did sue us. He did sue us. They sued us for around proportion of the job, about 50% of the value of the job. So there was no financial way we could pay for it. So what did we do? Obviously, we got our lawyer, and we told them about all the things that had gone wrong that were completely out of our control, and we made a case. And there was no settlement, as in they withdrew they were prosecuting us for, they were pursuing us for these claims. They withdrew the claims, and it was them there. But it was the absolute worst time. I had never in my life been forced to work Monday to Monday. I've worked Monday to Monday because I was pursuing something I'm passionate about. No, this was if I wasn't there on a Saturday or a Sunday, they were calling me up on my mobile, and I was in my house, with my dogs or with whoever, or a friend or my family, and why aren't you at the job site? So this is what now I understood it in hindsight. They used the architect to get close to me. And then he said, no, you call me every day when you're on job site, and that will help appease the situation, But it was a way of controlling me and controlling the team into what they wanted, and not what actually we could physically do. But we ended up doing it, and we ended up delivering this project, behemoth of a project. Just to get an equation, this was like about a year and a half turnover in one job, and we were selling about 10 jobs a year. So this was like 10x what we'd ever done before. So, I was in my early 20s. It was just a hell of a experience.
Wow.
I mean, I've never experienced anxiety at that level. And it wasn't just the managing the teams and working with the employees, and also hearing about how this team of people that they had been working through, how they treated us, our employees and our team. But it was just everything could have gone wrong, and then the personal pursuit right till the end. I had comments before, like, we know where you live. I had that.
This is a very powerful story. Thank you for sharing it, and you're a good storyteller too. Question: being older and more sophisticated now, and having gone through this experience, what would you have done differently? There's some obvious things. You would have not taken the contract. You would have listened to your father. You would have listened to your father's advice. But beyond avoiding this situation, where you would have not signed the second contract, but given that within that, what do you think that you could have or should have done anything else differently?
Yeah, I should have been a bitch. I should have told no. I think the whole thing here is the whole manipulation process was to get me to where they wanted me, and that's when we lost control. In business, right? If you've watched House of Cards, this is the same thing, right? It's power, right? Unfortunately, there's a side of business when things go wrong. It's about a balance of who's got more on somebody else, right? And that's how many things work in the world, right? And the reality is they had everything on me they could have, and I was literally not stubborn. I was like, you're right. I'm sorry. I should have put my foot down and say, you know what, screw you. If you want us to deliver this, step the hell back. Let me figure out the real terms and how we can deliver this. And if you want to go and damage our company, we won't deliver a single piece of wood more. And I didn't. I let them run over me. I didn't have, the wherewithal. I should say I was going to say the balls, but I don't really have the stomach juice to say, step back. I was scared. I was absolutely frightened, and I always used to say to people, I used to compete in kickboxing as semi-professional. I always used to say there's two things I never had was fear and bull. Two things I never missed were fear, miedo y huevos nunca me faltaron, as they say in Spanish. So that means, I was always fearless, and I always had the stomach to do things, and here I was completely the opposite. I was scared, I was frightened. I would say yes to everything. I would say, we'll agree to that contract. I rallied the team around me to support my insecurities. And that was a big mistake. I should have, if the Jason today, this happened, I would just say, step back. If you want me to help you, you want me to finish this, I need you to understand what you can do to me and what you can't. Because what you do to me there is completely hindering the final goal. And that's the difference, yeah.
That's a powerful lesson. I've often seen variations of the same pattern, that when clients are unhappy, they slowly micromanage more and more and more until the client effectively takes over. And it's powerful to recognize that in the early stages of that sort of micromanagement. And that's when you realize either like you're messing up in a huge way, or they're overstepping their bounds.
Yeah.
That's a powerful lesson. Any other lessons before we wrap up?
No, I was just going to say, I think that it was a little bit late in the day when I got emotional or spiritual support. I would say anybody who is in any position of responsibility in any organization or any role, not just marketing, not just sales, not just finance, not just operations, product engineering, don't underestimate the power of having professional counsel for your mental, spiritual, psychological health. At the end of the day, we're all in a cumulative sense, like energy balls, little balls of energy, and when you're dealing with such negative energy, it affects your mind and your body and your soul, everything in you, and I would just say, even if it's just a little rift that you've had with your boss, your customer, your employee, your contract, whoever it is, go and talk to somebody about it. It makes a complete world of difference. Bottling it up in yourself is just debilitating that ball of energy you've got that is powerful and good. And that's all I'd say. I contacted that therapist on building number 4. I should have contacted that therapist on building number 0. I should have had that asset before. Now I have it. Now I have an issue. I have anything. I know where I can turn. I know how to deal, or at least I don't know how to, but I've got some of the tools to figure it out. I didn't have any tools then, and I guess I was young and ambitious, and that's some of the cost that you pay.
I think a lot of people in our modern world look down on having spiritual guidance, but I think you correctly point out, it's very underrated, whether it comes from a professional psychologist, psychiatrist, therapist, or a spiritual guru like your priest, rabbi, pastor, or there are lots of other sources of spiritual support.
It can be a friend. It can be a very good friend.
Good friends and family. That's another source. I happen to be really into Stoicism and classic thoughts, and rereading a lot of the ancient Greek and Roman wisdom often gives me patience and fortitude, to quote the New York Public Library Lions. And this is what you do need: patience and fortitude.
Yeah, I think that there's as I said, like from a very young age, I've always felt very fearless, and having that fortitude, or that mental fortitude. And as I said, like they always used to say, like huevos no te faltan. You've got the gut to go through something. Like I used to be completely fearless about stepping into a ring and getting my head punched in by somebody else, or getting my legs, hit by low kicks and things like that. If you see UFC. But this was totally different, because this attacked an area in my life that I wasn't strong in, And one thing is to compete in a sport and feel strong because you're good at football or rugby or softball or whatever, you're kickboxing or boxing or martial arts. At the end of the day, if you're attacked in an angle that you're not developed in, you haven't got the strength of you might say the emotional fibers to deal with that, then you're only as weak as you're only as strong as your weakest link, and that was my case.
Absolutely, you implied a point there that I want to say explicitly, because it's important that often people see themselves as being really strong, and they are, but it turns out or let's say emotionally strong. So you see yourself as being emotionally strong, but it actually turns out you're emotionally strong in this area, like in kickboxing. But as soon as it goes to a different area of your life, you become a weakling. I have friends who are like the most intense asshole negotiators, investors, squeezing every penny out, and then when they're like with their girlfriend, they're like they just like melt down and will just like start like suddenly will do anything that this girl says, and I'm like,
where's this?
Like the same person.
Yeah.
And by the way, variations that have happened to you, I've been running political campaigns, and also I've had multiple lawsuits against me, like often not even knowing my name, just like subpoenaing like different companies to try to get who's behind these different campaigns, and like it freaks me out, like taking on like big, bad, powerful, corrupt people, and then they get these big name lawyers. I've been in that same situation as you, so I understand that fear.
Yeah, I think there's one more thing I'd like to throw out there, because
please.
I would just say, that experience with that lawyer was taught me as well, is that there isn't any such thing as somebody should be like this or be like that. People are so unique. Professionals, I always expected a lawyer to be a certain type of character, a certain type of breed, a certain type. Right. We seem to treat industries, like dog breeds. Like a mastiff looks like this, a bulldog looks like this, a boxer looks like this. A German Shepherd dog looks like this. Well, that's not the same with Homo sapiens. We're such we're so variable and so all over the elementary chart that it doesn't mean that a marketeer is just going to wear a shirt and a hat. He might wear a t-shirt, a polo t-shirt, or he might wear shorts and a shirt. Like, I just thought, I think that was wrong. My preconceived idea of, I never really dealt with lawyers in my life. It's like they're probably the third time I've ever been involved in some type of, legal. I never had a pretty unproblematic background. And, I think the only time I dealt with the law was when I pranged a car. But but the reality is that it was more like it was just weird. Like, I Googled this guy, and I sort of, figured out what he looked like because there's some pictures on Google Images, and I was like, okay, he's a badass. He's done this court case, he's won this, he's won that, and this guy obviously represents these people. Wow, like I'm in the soup, And when I met him, there's this little guy about, half my weight and about two heads below me, smoking, quite clearly, had gone to lunch and just completely. His dress was just completely random, which is fine. But I'll just say, don't have any expectations. That's all I'd say.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I have to make that same point in different words, which I'll share because you and the audience all three of you might find it interesting. Which is, first, the academic variation of the same point is any academic discipline, there are like a whole bunch of rules, like Econ 101, supply and demand. But beyond all the one-to-one intros in every academic discipline, it's all about questioning all like the basic assumptions. Well, actually, supply and demand doesn't hold in this cases. And it's the same thing in real life that, okay, there's a whole bunch of patterns for what lawyers are like, but as you get complex and higher up, then suddenly that's where things get a lot less obvious and things don't look like what you're saying. Another way of making the same point is, I think, to quote myself, wisdom makes you weird. And by that, what I mean is like, once you start, like, if you are a cookie cutter, just like, oh, lawyers look like this, lawyers dress like that. If you're just like everyone else, you're going to have the same results. You're not going to be especially good.
Well,
in order to be really good, you need to just like come up with some like weird, unique, different approach. And sometimes it's having the jacket with coffee stains and the cheap cigarettes and being that type of guy.
He's a killer, he was a killer. Like he is. I mean, as I said, I'll repeat this. I Googled the guy and I was scared. I was like, if this guy if this guy goes after us, we are done. And he ended up doing it. But thankfully, we had so much evidence of a lot of things were out of our control that allowed us to them to retract their claims or what they were going for. But the point is that I just had this expectation and this badass person. But it's so true what you say. Like different people get different results. Like different in the positive sense.
It's not just like it's not just different people. It's that to get really good at something, you have to come at it from left field. Like the only way David can beat Goliath is by like going around the back and using the slingshot. So like if he looked and acted and spoke just like any other lawyer, he wouldn't be the superstar lawyer. He would get the same results as other lawyers.
No, I have actually I have a saying which is screw the mold. I always tell people just screw the mold. Like at the end of the day, like it's only there because of someone else putting it there before you. At the end of the day, like he didn't break any laws having coffee on his shirt and cheap, smoking cheap cigarettes. It was just more the fact that it's a society thing. Like we have expectations and we have, we expect this and we expect that. But at the end of the day,
right. But by the way, I just realized now that a few weeks ago I actually tweeted something similar, right? On my Twitter at @SMorganFriedman. I just tweet like my own observations about life, and I recently tweeted I thought of this: the marketer's greatest trick was making you think it's not marketing, and I think this is a similar point that like the greatest trick is playing off the famous double line that when you get to the highest, best version of anything, you don't even realize that thing is happening. Like right. I've been in negotiations with super, super important people for like really, really high stakes, world changing things. And I didn't even realize I was in negotiations. I thought like, we're like I was just like, this person wanted to meet me to talk about things and pick my brain and build a relationship. But it actually turns out afterwards, oh, wow, he was really testing me out to see if I would be this. So you sometimes you don't realize that this guy is the lawyer doing this. Sometimes you don't realize an interview is an interview.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think wise people do that. I think wise people have ways of analyzing. I mean, I actually have I did some study. I did some coursework once on about interpreting body language, and
yes,
and it's actually helped me. I wasn't that long. It was about a year and a half ago. I read a book and did some Q&A, and it's interesting because it actually does help understand people, and you actually start to take it in without even noticing it. For example, I should have realized that they weren't aggressive, because if they were aggressive, they would have told me they were going to be waiting for me there to build up the pressure. Do you see? So you see, but because now, I mean, if somebody had jumped on me in a meeting, it'd be like kind of weird and unprofessional. It's not the type of things these guys do. So I think you've got to read into the signs, and don't, as I said, don't have any expectations for anybody. And I should have expected the worst, and I should have told them the worst, and I should have stood my ground, and I didn't. I let them run over me. I was weak, but they were they personally harassed me, and that was probably the worst thing that's happened to me in my one of the worst things happened in my whole life. I actually one of the weeks I actually was fearing my personal security.
Nice.
Yeah, because I knew how bad this was. The pressure was just so much. I mean, of course, it's self-inflicted, right? I don't think there was ever any possibility of something happening, but it was just the build up. Like they obviously had some profile on my Instagram account or WhatsApp looking at my statuses, and it was just weird. Just stuff was just weird, and that was just too much. That was just, my mind just went overkill, and then you suddenly have these suspicions, which actually probably never ever will happen. It's like when you wake up in the night, you hear a noise, and it's just a leaf falling off the tree onto the roof.
Totally. Jason, this was very insightful, great story. You're a great storyteller. Yeah, and let's stay on after I say bye, because I went off the record. I want to get some of the names.
Thank you.
But this was a great story. Thank you for coming on, and to be continued later.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.
Bye.